Hello and welcome. My name is Sharon Bonney. I'm here at Anson Green, and we would love to present to you today, Adult Education presents the perfect ROI and partnership opportunities. So I mentioned quickly that our presenters are Anson Green with Tyson. You're going to hear quite a bit from him on the workforce side. And I'm Sharon Bonney with COABE, and I'm the CEO for the Coalition on Adult-Based Education. Our mission at COABE is to inspire educators so adults succeed and communities thrive. And we do this through 4 different ways: leadership, professional development, advocacy, and communication. One of the things we're really excited about is, in addition to our national data sheets, we also have data sheets that are specific to states. So we provide data that's specific on the state with regard to literacy, numeracy, and it also goes down to the county level. We provide a number of different factors there. So we just encourage you to go to our educateandelevate.org website, where we have campaign materials such as these state data sheets. So one of the things that we think quite a bit about here at COABE is the fact that education issues really impact the workforce. So for example, when you think about the fact that 51.4 million low-skilled adults in literacy and 75.1 million low-skilled adults in numeracy are either in the workforce or trying to get into the workforce, this is a really serious issue. And then when you think about the fact that 43 million adults lack the basic skills to even compete in the workforce, that again really is a serious issue that impacts our friends in the workforce sector. As well, 30 million adults do not even have a high school diploma, yet all colleges and 63% of all employers require at least a high school diploma. So here again, a very serious issue that's impacting the workforce. 20% of all adults with a high school diploma have only beginning literacy skills, and yet many of them are working. So think again about how this impacts the workforce sector. We also know that 28 million in the US lack basic digital skills to even operate a computer, yet many of them are operating computers. Again, a real workforce issue for us. So we think about reskilling for jobs that pay a family-sustaining wage. Our adult learners in the workforce sector are the first ones out of jobs in a bad economy and the last ones to get jobs when the economy picks up. Our adult learners are the working poor. Approximately half of our adult learners are employed. However, they're often underemployed or just employed in part-time jobs. So think about sort of cobbing together a job at McDonald's and then also cobbing together a job with Walmart and then trying to somehow make a family-sustaining wage out of that. So our real challenge is that low-skilled adults are 2 times as likely to be unemployed, 3 times as likely to be in poverty, 4 times as likely to be in poor health, and 8 times as likely to be incarcerated. And this is all information that we have gathered from various sources such as American Institute for Research, such as American Community Survey, really high-level information that we're provided through research. We also know that the economic impact of literacy is amazing. So if we were able to move everybody up from, say, level 1 to level 3, we'd see $1.4 trillion gain in GDP, or a 6.7% growth. Knowing that that's a very big initiative and probably wouldn't be able to do that, if you even look at being able to move everybody up from level 1 to, say, level 2, we'd see a $129 billion gain in GDP, or a 0.6% growth. And this was something that came out recently that was funded through the Barbara Bush Foundation that Dr. Jonathan Roswell put out in the Gallup. So this was picked up by Forbes. This is information you can find easily that we can also provide links to as well. And then there's some really astounding information, such as the fact that there's a $2.5 billion in tax revenue and reduced expenses for every 400,000 adults who earn a high school diploma. So that's a savings of $6,250 per person. We also look at $200 billion estimated value to our economy and reduced costs for public support programs for low literacy adults. So you can see there really is this big return on investment for adult learners. And that 47% of GED recipients go on to higher education and have a 90% rate of persistence, which I just think speaks to the grit of these adult learners. So as well, we talk about the individual impact, that there's a 53% gain in income over 10 years for adult learners, and that just 100 hours of studies equals the equivalent of about $10,000 in their income. So you think about if you are working sort of at that baseline that we just talked about, and you're working these part-time jobs and trying to put together a family-sustaining wage, adult education really will help you. As well, we know that a mother's education level is the greatest determinant of her children's future academic success. In fact, to the tune of about 74%. So when we think about adult education, it really breaks those cycles of intergenerational poverty and illiteracy. When a parent can read, they teach their children to read. They help their children with their homework. So that's why family literacy is such an important component of adult basic education. As well, I personally love to talk about this. 74% of our adult learners are people of color. Adult education increases racial equity. So when we're looking at our current times and trends, it's really great to know that adult education's been at it for years, working with people of color, really increasing that racial equity mantra. So who are adult learners? This is the piece I love to talk about, because when you see this and you see kind of who we're working with, these are the people with the most barriers to employment. You're talking about displaced homemakers, the homeless and runaways, the foster care, those that have aged out of foster care, single parent, migrant farm workers, long-term unemployed, English language learners, low-income adults, ex-offenders, those exhausting TANF, and those with learning disabilities. This is who comes through our doors, the 1.5 million adult learners who come through our doors annually, who we provide services to. And at the same time, our system is severely underfunded. Our field receives on average between $400 to $1,200 per pupil from the feds, compared to $10,000 per pupil in elementary education. So you see, this is who we're working with, and this is the funding that we receive. And our teachers on average take a pay cut and often work multiple jobs and work part-time jobs to be able to stay in this profession. Here's kind of an overview of the field of adult education by state. You can see that we're in every single state. Here's how we are, the venues of delivery for instruction. So you can see LEAs, local education agencies, community-based programs, faith-based programs, libraries. Look at that with community colleges as well as universities. So you can see we're over 500 that are out of the 2,000 plus that are delivered through community colleges and universities. And then we also see correctional education as well. And then urban, suburban, and rural breakdown as well. And then here's the age of learners that are served in our ROI Title II funded programs. We're looking at the vast majority of these are folks that would be considered at the workable age, right? And again, these are often the underemployed or the unemployed, the working poor. So adult education provides on-ramps to better jobs in community college. Our program serves as a talent pipeline. We reskill, we upskill, we provide literacy, numeracy, digital literacy, and HSE, high school equivalency classes. We also provide integrated education training, which breaks barriers for adult learners. You're going to hear a little bit more about that from Anson. I wanted to just quickly highlight a few really great early innovators who showcase virtual IETs, virtual integrated education training models. So out of Indiana, you can see there's a number of virtual programs they provided. And this, of course, had to do with COVID and having to go virtual instead of being in the brick and mortar programs, as well as Virginia. Here, Virginia also was one of the early innovators for IET. And now, before I go any further, I want to introduce Anson and give him a proper introduction. So Anson Green is a former state director of adult education for Texas. And he did a lot of great work in Texas. I had the opportunity to meet him in person in 2016 when he was still a state director. And since then, we've stayed in touch. As a matter of fact, he recently won our COABE Administrator of the Year Award for the outstanding work he's done in Texas. So I couldn't think of a better person to help co-present with me, because Anson is now working for Tyson. He's an executive there at Tyson, and he's in charge of their workforce and education program. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Anson Green, who's going to talk about Texas and the work that they did there. Anson?
All right, I want to thank everybody, and thank you, Sharon, for that great introduction. Anson Green from Texas, and I really wanted to spend some time this morning talking about kind of a coalescence of policy, practice, and business return. I'm going to bring a perspective that comes from teaching in a GED class 20 years ago, through running a community college campus for immigrants and refugees in San Antonio, Texas, being a state director in the state of Texas, and now working on economic opportunity for Tyson Foods in a worldwide Fortune 100 company. The title of the presentations was Perfect Return on Investment Opportunity, but I wanted to begin with a little historical perspective, because it's not always been that way in adult education. There's been a big transformation over the last 6 years, and people are still kind of hearing the news about this and seeing the impacts of it locally. You saw how big the system is that Sharon presented, and could also see that transforming something like that might take a while. So I'll share a little story of this 6-year transition from a system that many of you might be remembering back from 1998 to 2014 called the Workforce Investment Act. And that system really brought adult education somewhat into the workforce realm, but we still operated in very siloed ways, and there was an intention of integration, but it just never worked out that way. We found a lot of good ways to build walls and hedges that kept us from collaborating. Sometimes the innovators out there would find a way to peek through to the other side, adult education into the workforce world, or the workforce world into adult education and community college work. And occasionally we would look over to see what the other person was working on. Our boss would ask us to integrate or collaborate or find some sort of partnership. And we would do our best to do that under WIA, but it was always hard fought, and sometimes the outcomes were pretty weak. And sometimes we didn't like what we saw when we looked on the other side. But we did collaborate, sometimes reluctantly, and we got a lot done under that law. But when the new law came in, we didn't have to worry about things being quite so as upsetting as they had been in the past, because the new law really found ways to have the system work in a way that didn't force the student to navigate through the different systems on their own. And that was really the fault and the challenge of WIA. Was it really required the student to find their way through the different systems, because as we all know, students are accessing all of these services, and sometimes spend most of their time doing that rather than getting an outcome of those services. So when the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act passed in 2014, it was really a new dawn, and really put the student and the customer at the center of the system, and built some real strong strategic requirements that caused the systems to work much better together. There was a huge focus on workforce development across each of the systems, including adult education. This was a transformational piece of legislation for adult education. Career pathways were the name of the game, and the things that really are making the law work well and better than WIA did was that there is requirements for joint planning, and most importantly, joint performance accountability. The measures across everybody's systems are the same, and so we're talking from one song sheet now when it comes to performance. But still, the organizational structures are challenged sometimes, and it's taken years sometimes for states to really come around and get with the program in terms of innovating and realizing a different type of service delivery. And we are now seeing, after really 6 years of implementation, true performance outcomes coming out of the system. And that's been very much something we've waited for and are so eager to see and show Congress. In Texas, we really did this transformation full throttle. We wanted to take that brick and mortar GED class of your grandpa's days and turn it into something that was much more dramatic and transformational, that met all types of different functions that our students need in life out of the public systems. So I'm going to take you through what I call the Texas two-step. We're going to talk about how we corralled the herd, how we got the state of Texas, a huge state system, in line and on board with a new system of service delivery, how we did it through policy, how the West was won, how we did and used funding to really incentivize and build performance. Our big goals and our big mission was accomplished related to career pathways, and then really the whole time a big focus on employers. So corralling the herd was quite a feat in Texas. It is a massive system. In Texas, the adult education program is in the Texas Workforce Commission, an agency that has a wide variety of other workforce training, child care, and other types of programs that we use to leverage a greater service delivery value for students through that system integration. Each of the WIOA programs and titles is housed in one agency, and that has helped us out tremendously. We have a huge business focus being a workforce agency, and so we wanted to get to that business customer and get a value to them through our funding sources from the federal government, state of Texas, down to our local communities and providers and down to business. Our system in adult education was primarily made up of a wide variety of different types of organizations, from community colleges, workforce boards, nonprofits, educational service centers, and local education agencies. And it's the strength of these types of relationships that really, I think, brought us the outcomes that we could get out of the system. Those partnerships with those organizations resulted in other partnerships with 44 of our 50 community colleges in Texas and all 28 of our local workforce boards. So we thought of things not as local providers, this is my money, not your money, but a system approach to getting the best service out to the community. We asked our local systems to think in terms of a consortium model. Who in the community does the service the best, and how can you align with that? And so we've spent our focus on having our local communities have individuals that acted as system navigators to connect the services strategically, performance, and funding, and then we could bring a greater impact and value for the student, our customer. Those consortiums were a wide variety of arrangements, with certain individual organizations being grant recipients and fiscal agencies, and others providing service delivery. And I was really proud of the different types of arrangements we were able to get in Texas. I wanted to share two examples. This is one in a rural area in East Texas, Literacy Council of Tyler. A small community-based organization with a big vision was able to bring together a wide variety of regional community colleges and school systems to bring one large system focus to the East Texas area. And this Literacy Council is one of the best performing providers in the state of Texas, but it's because of the strength of the partnership that they brought together. In an urban area, we've got Fort Worth, Texas with Workforce Solutions, Tarrant County, and you've got a similar arrangement with school districts, community colleges, a workforce board, nonprofits, and others working together to bring one value service. So each individual organization brings their best foot forward, and they bring it together for a service delivery design for students. When we go to how the West was won, I want to talk a little bit about a carrot and stick approach we used to get the system rejuvenated and revitalized under WIA and transformed. A vision doesn't get these things accomplished alone, and requirements surely don't do that, but they help. And we had a wide variety of different types of requirements that you don't see in most other states that we found to be super beneficial in Texas. Each of our Texas requirements in a local program has a consortium model or contractual partnerships that are required, not optional. Operational collaboration, meaning real collaboration, not just agreements and handshakes, but real transactional models where individuals move between the systems, are co-referred across systems, and receive wide variety in a simplistic way for the customer. Career Pathways is the standard model in Texas. Many states lead with GED and other things. We lead with Career Pathways and think of GED and ESL and other things as component parts of a career-focused system. Each of our providers had required enrollment targets for career pathways, for business engagements, and so we could really manage on a requirement side the stick approach and make sure that we could move incrementally the system into a more diverse and workforce-focused system. And then we required distance education of all of our local community programs. And this really served us well, as you can imagine, in Texas during the pandemic, because we had over 10 years of distance education experience and could just basically go from good to great when the pandemic hit. Putting money where our mouth is. We knew requirements were not going to accomplish this alone. And so we put a lot of money out each year in Texas when I was the state director for capacity building. About $6 million a year goes out in Texas, and this is the carrot. We built capacity for system integration, nonprofit engagement, ability to benefit for our community colleges, performance, distance education, and career pathways. So we took the excuse off the table that we don't have the money, we can't do that, by infusing not only funding, but also the best-in-class expertise from consultants and from mentoring programs to help our system lift to the next level. I want to talk a little bit about our community college relationships because that's what I was probably most proud of. We focus not only on reforms in workforce development and integration through integrated education and training models, but also with a revision of how we thought of developmental education in the state. Every state seems to have a plan on college and career readiness. Texas has one on the higher ed side called 60 by 30 Tex. And we had one in adult education, 20,000 students in career pathways by the year 2020. So we set a bold milestone, and that let us lead in a way, not only with our community colleges, but on adult ed when it came to career pathways. The speeding pathways piece helped us really get to what our businesses were looking for, which was a higher skilled workforce. We reached our 20,000 student and career pathway goal 2 years early, when 3,000 students over in 2018. And that shows how a vision, big investment, and the stick of performance could get the system to transition not over a generation, but over just a few years to something that was of great value to our business community and to our job seekers. When we looked at career pathways, it seemed like everywhere we turned, everybody had a different definition of it. And that was something I really wanted to understand, because career pathways is something we hear a lot, but I think a little diagnosis into what lens people look through when they hear career pathways is important. The K-12 world, here's it one way, workforce and adult ed, here's it another way, and community colleges, here's another way. So when we work with our K-12 partners, it's all about dropout retention, it's all about alignment to higher ed. The lens that we look at in workforce and adult education is economic mobility for the underprepared workforce and business relevance. In our community colleges, we're really looking at pathways in terms of speeding to degrees and college business redesign. And by looking at the lens of a career pathways by our different customer parts in our system, it really helped us get a grander vision of what each component area needed and what we could do together to build a solution. We really wanted to hit that student debt solution, because student debt, as we all know, is something that's weighing on many, many communities and many students that are in our systems and general public. This is what we wish all students would do, but of course, our student population comes in with a lot of different needs and different assets that they bring to the table. And so we were fortunate to really look at this and take a hard look at the money that was wasted in remedial and developmental education and find a way that we could do something dramatically different. So what we did with our adult education program was to say, remedial education is not something we want to perpetuate in Texas. We do a similar service of high quality, and the underskilled individual in adult education is our core customer. So we took on the burden of developmental education largely in Texas, not completely, but largely, and started to focus how federal funding could be used, not student debt, but federal funding through adult ed could be used to reduce cost and remediation for individuals that want a degree, and to help those that want to get a career and go to work, find a way to do that at no cost also. So it was a value proposition for our state, for our communities, and for our customers. We reduced the phases of education that individuals had to go through, increased our quality, reduced the student debt, and we kept a strong focus on student goals. We don't want to give the student anything that they don't sign up for when they come back to education and adult education. I want to end by talking about how we went all in for employers. I work for an employer now, and I think our employer focus in Texas helped carry everything else I told you much further down the road, because we really wanted to help our students and our employers in Texas thrive. The Texas story in Texas is one, like many states share, of an increasingly underskilled workforce and one that's increasingly limited English. This image to me always tells it all. You see the younger population in blue is our Hispanic population. highly growing, which is a great value for the state, but largely coming in with more education and workforce challenges than our standard white non-Hispanic populations, which are the retirement age populations you see there in the orange. And so we had to build the state and help the state start to migrate so that we could be the great economic engine that the state of Texas is into the future. And adult education was critical to this. So you might ask, why would employers want to get involved? What could they do, and what are the value lenses that they look at through when they look at public investments and public engagement with colleges, adult education, and workforce development? Well, of course, businesses are interested in advancement, helping their workers communicate better, and of course, helping our workers collaborate more. But businesses are also very interested in the equity side and the diversity side of building and bringing new ideas within the company to the forefront, building better relationships in the communities where they do business, finding that equity balance within their workforce, and being overall good corporate citizens. I wanted to bring an example of just one of many examples in Texas of how an adult education provider is integrated and working collaboratively with big industries. This is in the Houston area with one provider out of many out there in Houston, the Harris County Department of Education. So for us in adult education, employers is not some other thing that somebody else does. It's our main piece of work that we like to focus on because our students want jobs and our businesses need workers. At Family Dog, at Tyson Foods, I'll tell you that it is the same story for us as a Fortune 100 company. We are focused on stabilizing our workforce and expanding opportunities of those workers. We have a huge, diverse workforce, over 121,000 frontline workers. 60% of those workers are immigrants and refugees, representing 60 countries in 50 different languages. Here's a snapshot of our Dakota City plant in Nebraska. And you can see when you're trying to run one of the biggest, most progressive food companies in the world, and you have a workforce diversified like this, you've got to think of things in a whole different way when it comes to workforce development and education. So I'm really proud of our Upward Academy adult education program and the Upward Pathways program that I lead. That is a partnership in the states that we do business to bring our public partners into the plants and in through remote education currently and help them lift and build the skills of our diverse workforce so they can be upskilled into next level jobs and find more stability in their lives as they work for our company. We also look at return on investment. Anybody working within a business knows that that's the name of the game. And we see tremendous return on investment when it comes to working with our federal and state partners in adult education and workforce development in our community colleges. We see high rates of return for retention, higher rates of return for improved communication, satisfaction at work, and loyalty. These are things that bring great value to the company and help us keep the bottom line secure and help us keep our workforce happy working for Tyson Foods and wanting to grow within the company. With that, I'm going to turn it back over and we'll close out with Sharon Bonney. Let me let Sharon take the screen here.
Great. Thank you so much, Anson. So this is just a purview of some of the partners that we at COABE have. We at COABE have more than 100 state, local, and national partners. These are just some of them, like I mentioned. And I also just wanted to mention, I'm going to share my screen here, Anson. It looks like I'm disabled from sharing the screen, so maybe Elizabeth can help us with that. But I also wanted to mention one other sort of side note to this, and that is that we at COABE will be holding an ability to benefit virtual symposium. And that I know many of you that will be watching this, you work in the community college or university sector. So we want to invite you to join that because you're going to see some sort of best practices there on ways that you can use some federal funding that will help your enrollment and will also help your adult learners to get into jobs. So just want to put that pitch out there that this is who we're calling for: community college chancellors, presidents, provosts, financial aid leaders, and registrars. You can join us on November 17th. From 9 o'clock to 4 Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have wonderful, and I mean exciting presentations along the line of what you've just seen here delivered by Anson. So I want to thank you, Anson, for taking time to join us here to talk
Sure.
about what you did in Texas and the wonderful accomplishment that you had there. I know that that was why Tyson was so interested in bringing you on board as well. And I know you'll do great things at Tyson too.
Thank you.
Great. So with that, I'll turn this back to Elizabeth. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. We appreciate it.